You're listening to Nurse Converse, presented by Nurse.org, a collaborative podcast amplifying diverse nurse voices. Get ready for a dose of inspiration, a sprinkle of education, and a whole lot of community.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Nurse.org Nurse Converse podcast. This is Wali Khan. I am a certified registered nurse anesthetist, and I'm so excited to be venturing on this new journey with you where we're going to talk about very exciting things that are extremely relatable and perhaps even painful at times because we're all nurses and we have either seen them or experienced them or are currently experiencing them. So the point and purpose of this podcast is for you to feel that you are not alone, that there is hope, and all is not lost. So let's get started. Today's topic is so relevant because not only have we seen it up close and personal during the pandemic, but we're currently experiencing it right now. And that is this mass exodus of nursing. All the nurses that you know that are leaving in droves. And let's kind of refine that topic, the mass exodus of bedside nursing, because everyone that you know wants to leave nursing. And you're like, wait a minute. I remember just a few years ago, everybody wanted to be a nurse because it was the cool thing to do. It was very lucrative. Some people defined it as such. It was noble and, it was very selfless to want to be a nurse. But now you hear everybody's leaving to go to school or travel and they're burnt out and X, Y, and Z. And we'll discuss all of these factors as to why people are leaving. But let's face the truth, people are leaving nursing. It's a reality. It's happening. If you're a senior nurse, you've probably seen people come onto your unit, get orientation for 6 months, and bam, they're gone, on to the next one. And it's happening. And if you're somebody that's on the verge of retirement, you probably have been through the grinder and you have seen the revolving door phenomenon that is bedside nursing. If you're a current nurse, a recently graduated nurse, or considering a career in nursing, the opportunity for healthcare workers has never been higher. And that's a universal truth because people are always going to be sick. That's just the nature of this profession. People will always be sick. People will always get hurt. People will always have babies. So the healthcare industry is not on the decline. However, this particular group that we're talking about, nurses, there's a very strange phenomenon that's occurring. From the availability to enter any area that interests you, to job security, educational opportunities, to the potential for higher salaries, the healthcare industry will definitely be wide open for those who are ready to venture in it. But I want to share some statistics with you because nobody believes you when you just talk without some research and hard facts, right? So in March of 2022, kind of post-pandemic era, the American Nurses Foundation published some very alarming results of an impact survey that they did in the US. More than 12,000 nurses participated, so it's not just some small Facebook group. And more than 50% of those nurses completing the survey planned to leave or were considering leaving their position. And that's an increase of about 20% from the prior year. So that's 6,000 people out of those 12 said they were going to leave nursing or they're going to leave the current position that they're in. And there was a new survey released by Elsevier Health called Clinician of the Future. And it reveals a prediction that up to 75% of healthcare workers will be leaving the profession by 2025. If you're doing the math, that's 1 year away. 75%. Right, of healthcare workers will be leaving the healthcare profession by 2025. That's alarming. More than 150,000 healthcare providers actually left the industry from 2021 through 2022. And that's according to a report that was published by an analytics and data company called Definitive Healthcare. So where are these people going? Why are they leaving? Is the grass greener on the other side? I mean, is it worth it to venture out and leave the comfort and security of what you know? I read a very interesting article, which was actually published by a physician named Rachel Elena Norris. And she titled this article, Are America's Caregivers on the Brink of Extinction? The Pandemic Straw That Broke the Nurse's Back. Now, this hits really close to home because my background prior to going into anesthesia was critical care nursing, but more specifically trauma nursing, trauma ICU and trauma resuscitation. And I worked on the west side of Chicago in a very high acuity hospital. It was a county hospital. And I saw things that would completely break anyone. We were going through the pandemic just like anyone else. And I saw people working and completely fearful for not just their own lives, right? But the lives of their loved ones, fighting this unknown virus that has globally taken down the human population, right? So it's not some small thing. And what we realized during the pandemic was all of these flaws, all of these monsters in the closet that nursing's had that we just brushed away under the rug. And, we were going to deal with later, and that later became decades, and that decades are eventually a half a century old. And now all of these problems came to light. What kind of problems? Insanely dangerous patient to nurse ratios. No help, overworking, staffing issues, low pay, benefits. All of these things came to surface, and we realized, wow, we've got a real problem on our hand. And we've had these problems, but now we've come face to face with it. And now the nurses, the healthcare providers, they demand accountability. They want answers. They want solutions to these problems. Or you know what? We're walking, because we already have all of this fear and stress from the pandemic. And so these 3 years, I would say, from 2020 to 2023, was a period of revelation, of the veil being removed from nursing, and the bedside nurses saying, we've had enough. We're not going to take it, and some change needs to happen. The survey was done exactly 2 years after the pandemic first began. And what we found from this survey that they were talking about, Elsevier, was that both nurses and doctors are burnt out. Both nurses and doctors are at high risk of leaving the profession. All right, something we already know. The majority of healthcare workers don't feel like they have a good work-life balance, and that's extremely important, because in 2024, what people have now are options. They have options. They don't have to do the 9 to 5. They don't have to do the 312s. They don't have to do the 410s, and they don't have to be a W-2 employee. They don't have to be a slave to the system, right? That's the new wave. And so if I don't have that work-life balance, and you can't guarantee that I can spend time with my family or my loved ones or travel and do all of these things, well, quite frankly, this job isn't for me. And that's what options afford people. Many healthcare workers responded that dealing with families can be very stressful. And trust me, this is not some far-fetched truth. This is not some fable, some hyperbole. I remember when I was a bedside nurse, when I was in trauma ICU, and I would have patients that have been shot in the head or were in a traumatic car crash and are now intubated and have a breathing tube. And you have these family members that are trying to respond to the trauma in real time while trying to grieve, while trying to be hopeful, while being in the hospital, and they haven't slept and they haven't eaten and they're waiting for the results of a surgery or some sort of lab. And now they're letting all of those emotions out onto me, an individual who has also been standing up all night working to save their loved one. And now this clash of pain and emotion and fatigue and frustration now converge. And you take that over the span of a 10, 20, 30, 40-year nursing career, and what do you have? You have one of the ingredients of the exodus. All the healthcare workers also pinpointed specific challenges that are only going to continue to grow in the coming years. And I mean, just think about these things, right? We always hear about the baby boomers, the upcoming population. We have an aging population with increasing healthcare needs. Every single person that you meet on the street now has hypertension and diabetes. I mean, those are kind of like, it's the equivalent of having brown eyes now, right? Every person that you meet, they've got high blood pressure, because we Americans love to eat. We love to consume salt. Everybody and their moms has diabetes now, because we, again, are either genetically predispositioned to certain comorbidities, right? We get them because our parents and our grandparents have had them, or it's because of life choices that we've made. But the problem being, and also the recognition, is that there's an increasing healthcare needs. Also, some of the challenges that nurses are facing is that patients are becoming more empowered, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Because at one point or another, either you were a patient or your family has been a patient in the system, and people are becoming more empowered and taking responsibility and understanding that this is the quality of care that we deserve. They're holding the institutions to a higher regard. Well, guess who else is part of that institution? The nurses. They're being held to a higher regard. They're being held to a higher level of accountability. And so they must also rise up to the occasion of being held accountable. The fast pace of healthcare technology, man, you're either with it or you're not, right? Healthcare is changing. What we learned from the pandemic was telemedicine is a real thing and it's here to stay, right? Diagnosing and talking and writing prescriptions in the palm of your hand is a real thing. Communicating with your colleagues via an app that your hospital has installed on your phone is a real thing. And so these are all changes that you have to either keep up with or you're going to find yourself getting phased out and perhaps looking for a different career. But I want you to listen to me. 75% of the healthcare work base leaving the profession is a big deal. It's a really big deal. It's not something that should be taken lightly. But the hard reality is that it's also not new news, right? So, I mean, I've been in the nursing profession now, and when I think about it, it's crazy how time has flown. 10 years. I've got a decade under my belt. We're all used to hearing about the nursing shortages that face us now and in the future. It's only going to get worse if we don't do something about it. And at this point, we're kind of jaded. We're like, it is what it is. And if it happens, it happens. And I'll deal with it when I deal with it. And it probably won't happen to me because I got a backup plan. But that's not how it works. And that's not how it's working because not everybody has that cush backup plan or the ability to just leave and do something different. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this conversation. Why is an exodus occurring? Why are people leaving nursing, this incredible, noble, valiant profession that has been romanticized? Because let me tell you something. One thing that social media has done is it has romanticized nursing. From the dancing TikTokers to the trendy reels, right, to the glamorous, perfectly curated images that we see come up in the ads of scrub companies. Nursing and medicine in general is very romanticized until it's not. Until you get into the nitty gritty of nursing and you realize, man, this is hard work and this is hard work. So why are people leaving? What is going on? Well, people have options now. People are understanding in 2024 the true capacity of nursing, that I don't have to be stationary. I don't have to stay in the same unit. I don't have to stay in the same hospital. I don't have to stay in the same city or same state. Man, I don't even have to stay in the same continent, right? I can go to UAE or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia and work over there as a foreign nurse and get paid buku bucks because nursing affords me that option. And that's kind of related to point number 2, travel nursing. And that's something that we learned more so during the pandemic, that I can just pack my bags, leave for a 6, 8, 12-week assignment, make substantially more money than I would be if I'm at my W-2 job, right? Stuck in my little, hamster wheel of my 9 to 5 or my 3/12s, and it can be more rewarding. Nurses are sick of not being heard. Let me explain to you what that means if you don't. If you're an outsider looking in, or if you're just an insider looking in, nurses have been telling their administration, their charge nurses, their in-house supervisors, I don't feel safe at work. I'll give you an example. If you're a medical surgical nurse, also known as a med-surg nurse, it's not uncommon for you to have 8, sometimes 9, sometimes 10 patients per night. That is overbearing. That is unsafe. That's the definition of unsafe patient ratios. One human being should not be given the responsibility of taking care of 10 sick human beings who need around-the-clock care. That's a very simplified, oversimplified explanation of unsafe staffing ratio, right? And they're telling their supervisors, we don't feel safe, and they're not hearing. So you know what happens? A patient falls and breaks his hip, and now he has to get surgery, and voila, you got yourself a lawsuit. A patient went to the bathroom, fell down, and cracked their skull open and got a head bleed. But guess what? You were responsible for that patient, so you should have been looking. That other patient, oh, you know what? He's on suicide watch, and you were also supposed to be watching him. That other patient, he's going for surgery, and you should have stopped their tube feeding, but you didn't, and now you caused a delay, and that surgery can't happen. But wait a minute. That's only 4 out of the 10 patients that you were supposed to watch. You see how kind of if one domino falls, the entire puzzle just completely crumbles? And that is just a very oversimplified look inside what unsafe staffing is. not to mention all of the lateral violence, meaning coworker to coworker, as well as just violence that nurses experience on the job from their patients and their patient family members. Nurses aren't paid enough. I'm sorry. If you have any rebuttal to that, you're not a good person. That's all I'm going to say. If you think that the person taking care of your dying mother or father, or your wife who just gave birth, or your father who just had surgery for cancer, or you for any reason, and they say, hey, look, we need more money to feed our family, to take care of ourselves, to live, in this insanely crazy inflation world. And your response is no, 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 you don't deserve more money. Say these words out loud. Nurses are saying, look, there's crazy inflation. The world is changing. Everything is more expensive. We love our job and we want to take care of people, but we need more money to pay for the things that we need in life because nothing is free. And the response is, no, we can't pay you. That's absolutely not true. We know that's not true. So you know what nurses do? They strike, they walk out, they quit, they resign, they go look for a different job. Another reason why people are leaving, higher education. Right here, case example right here. I was really glad to be a bedside nurse, but you know what? There's greener pastures to be explored, and I want to explore that. I want to see what my potential is, right? I want to break that glass ceiling that I always thought was above my head, but actually it's not there because the sky really is the limits, and people want to explore that option. Increasing scope of practice. People want to be nurse practitioners. People want to be midwives, and people want to be nurse anesthetists and see what else is out there, see what other skills they can do, how much more knowledge they can retain, and how they can serve people better. And perhaps being at the bedside is a limiting factor to that growth that they're seeking. Not that bedside nursing is limiting them, but they've just realized that they have more potential than what was being offered in their current state of being. And then, as the point goes before, there's more pay. Who doesn't want to get paid more for doing the same job? Everybody. It's a no-brainer. It's not just about money. People want to feel valued. It's not about the money. It's not always about the money. People want to be respected. People want to be valued. People want to feel like they have a need. People want to feel needed. That's just basic human emotional need. The need to be needed. The need to be loved. The need to be respected. And to say, hey, we care about you. You're welcomed here. And a lot of these institutions haven't given nurses that. And so they're going to look for it elsewhere. And lastly, a very common thing that we hear is burnout. Burnout has been identified as a risk factor for attrition. As of 2019, burnout cost the healthcare industry, and I'm not making this number up, $4.6 billion in turnover and reduced productivity. We already talked about travel nursing. People want to travel the world and get paid. They want to travel the country and get paid more than they're getting paid on their unit. I mean, I knew nurses that were making $30,000 a week when they were doing the COVID travel nursing. It's not for everyone, but it's for someone, and they're doing it. And then this one here, as you're listening to this on social media is actually a reason for people leaving the bedside. Because now you have something called nurse influencers or physician influencers, right? This TikTok that we made fun of about nurses dancing and doctors flexing and all of this stuff. Well, guess what? It turned out to be pretty lucrative. And some folks said, I'm just going to take this uniform and I'm going to wear it, but not in the hospital, but outside the hospital in front of my camera. And I'm going to get a little smart with it. And I'm going to find a way to make it economically beneficial to me. I'm going to use my degree in a different scope and different manner. Now, you may agree, you may disagree, you may like it, you may dislike it, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, but that's the truth. That people are making more money with their degrees outside of the hospital than they are inside the hospital. And you'll see a lot of these user-generated content that is coming out of healthcare providers that are partnering up with companies that will pay them to be representatives for them. People like to use the word influencers. I personally digress and have many different thoughts about that, but people are doing that. People are finding different ways to be happy, to feel valued, to feel wanted, and just simply respected. And not to mention this one right here. This is actually part of the exodus because as people are leaving, new graduate nurses are not able to find jobs. And I remember in 2014, I had the same issue. You'll graduate school, you'll pass your boards, you'll get a license, but institutions hospitals will not hire you because you don't have any experience. You don't have any prior experience. Now, how can one have prior experience having a job which they just went to school for and graduated and got their license for? It's a vicious loop of nothingness. You won't hire me because I don't have experience. I don't have experience because I just graduated. I just graduated because I went to school to get the job that I'm applying for now because it would have qualified me to be part of this job. And so I know many people that have graduated 6 months ago, 7, 8 months ago, and are still waiting in the application pool of all of these hospitals because they'll get rejected interview after interview because they don't have experience. And that's the truth. That's what's happening. At this point, you're like, yeah, the world is running out of nurses. Tell me something I haven't heard before. We know that it's not just nurses. It's healthcare professionals at all levels. And that's what's concerning. There's an Instagram account. It's called Woke Doctors. They pointed out that 11,000 qualified medical students didn't match with residencies this past year. If you follow just like the healthcare culture, you probably know this, that there are so many applicants into these residencies, people that want to be doctors or are doctors. They've graduated from medical schools and now they're applying for residencies and there aren't residency positions. Like, how does that work? And the Association of American Medical Colleges, the AAMC, has projected a shortage of between 54,100 and 139,000 physicians by the year 2033. So please don't think, oh, it's just nurses being affected. No, it's the entire system. And when it's the entire system, you should be concerned. You should be listening, you should be watching, and you should be taking notes and preparing for how you're going to take care of yourself, your family, your future, your profession, because healthcare is an interrelated system. And when we just say, oh, it doesn't affect me, no, it does affect you. It will come around and affect you. And you have to be concerned. The issue with the shortages doesn't necessarily seem to be a lack of willing bodies wanting to get into the healthcare industry. That's not the problem. You go on Instagram right now, you type in #nurse, and you'll see hundreds of thousands of posts on that, right? Or #future nurse, #future nurse practitioner, #future CRNA. People want these jobs. That's not the problem. It's not that people have grown to hate nursing. That's not the issue. The issue seems to be with access and retention. That's where the problem lies. There are many key questions that need to be addressed, and I want you to think about each of these questions. Are our educational systems accepting a well-rounded population of healthcare workers into programs? Or are you just willy-nilly taking people because they're paying your school? Is there a criteria for emotional intelligence that is saying these folks deserve to be here? They want to be here, right? And many programs now are instituting these type of questions. They're called EQI into their application processes to see if these people, these group of individuals, truly want to be here and if they belong. And that has nothing to do with intellect, right, per se, but emotional intelligence. Are our healthcare facilities equipped to train new employees properly to set them up for success? I had a job once where I was there for about 5 years, and they had zero continuing education that was either enforced, and I'm going to use that word because you should be forced to continuing education in healthcare because medicine is always changing. They had no system set up for education. They had nothing set up to advance the level of growth or talent or skill. It's just that if you were in, you were in, and that was it. Good. And now you can work until you're dead or retire, right? Are we strengthening the workforce that we have? Are we increasing them in intelligence? Are we preparing them to succeed with the new wave of challenges that we face as healthcare providers? Are our workplaces focused on employee retention through support in and out of the workplace? I mean, don't talk to me about diversity and inclusion. Don't talk to me about mental health stigma when you've done nothing for that. Words are so incredibly cheap, right? We don't just talk about mental health when one of our colleagues commits suicide, Or, a physician kills himself because he was so overworked and so tired and had so much going on in his life, but everybody ignored the signs. We love to make posts and say these empty words. I'm here for you. Please reach out and talk to me. But when people actually need help, you think the people that they work for, these institutions that they work for, they're the ones that they go to first to seek help? No, because these systems aren't equipped to help people. Right? We always say people over profits, people over profit. But let me tell you something. That's not the way that the system works, because that's not how it's designed. And these are not some conspiracy theories that I'm making up because I don't like the system. It's because it's true. I have seen colleagues that I've worked with take their lives because they couldn't take it. Do you understand how prevalent suicide is in the healthcare industry? And so are our workplaces focused on support in and out of the workplace? And I'm asking you these questions. Yes, they're rhetorical questions, but they have answers. You have those answers because you have to ask yourself that when you go to work. When you're meeting that nursing supervisor for your next evaluation, you shouldn't just be looking at that dollar sign. There's so much more to you than just the dollar sign. And that's what our society has led us to believe, is that if you're getting paid, hey, collect that green, get that bag. No bag is going to fill this, and no bag is going to take care of this. You have to do that. You have to take the responsibility and the ownership of taking care of your heart, of your mind, of your body, and all those things that you hold sacred. You have to do that. No one else can do that for you. Another question that you should be asking: are current healthcare workers getting access to the physical and mental health treatment that they need from the trauma of working through a pandemic? But, I say pandemic because remember, that was the straw that broke the back of nursing, but also everyday jobs. Going back to my own personal experience, because I can only speak to myself right now, I saw children getting shot in the head for 5 straight years. I saw people getting burned alive because I was also working in a burn ICU, burn resuscitation unit. I saw car crashes. I saw children dying every single night, and mothers losing their sons and fathers losing their daughters, and, delivering bad news to people and putting people in body bags and toe tags and dealing with the police and homicide and gang violence. I saw that. Our hospital, our unit, had a social worker. But not just a hospital social worker. It was a social worker of our unit. The trauma unit had a social worker. The trauma unit had a chaplain. There's a hospital chaplain, but the trauma unit had a chaplain. And they took care of the needs because they understood, look, this is not normal. People shouldn't be seeing this stuff or doing this stuff, let alone on a consistent basis for a living. And if we don't take care of our own, catastrophic. And so are your institutions set up in a manner where you're getting that help that you need? And yes, it's okay to need help. It's okay to need some support, some guidance from time to time. Doesn't make you different, doesn't make you any less, actually makes you incredibly strong because you're taking care of yourself so you can be even stronger for the ones that need you to be strong for them every single day around the clock, because that is your life's work. It's not your life, it's your life's work. You do that for work, but that's not your life. And so there's not a nursing shortage. There's an exodus, but there's not a shortage. And you may be familiar with this sentiment, right? There isn't an actual nursing shortage. In fact, there are more registered nurses now than ever before. The shortage is in nurses that are actively wanting to work at the bedside or in staff positions. That's the shortage. Because the grass is greener for a lot of them on the other side. That pasture is worth grazing into, and they're doing that. NPR reported that there are even nurses who are wanting to work but are not able to get their licenses because of delays in the administrative end. And people are waiting up to 6 months or even a year to get their actual nursing licenses. So people want to work. The conditions just suck, right? And they're just tired of hearing about it. And I'm tired of hearing about it. And I did something. And I said, I love my job and I love being a trauma nurse, but I got to go. I got to grow, right? I got to fly. I got to get out this nest. And so I went back to school. I went back to CRNA school and I got a doctorate, and I'm doing something different, which I love. right? Nursing will always have a piece of my heart and soul, bedside nursing, but I knew that I could do something more and something different, and I did that. But that was my option. That may not be the case for you. When it comes to addressing these critical issues, such as mental health, its largest group of providers, nurses, and ensuring that healthcare workers have a safe environment in which to work with, most efforts have fallen short. So what can you do? Number one, recognize and see who you can go to for help. What do I mean by that? If you have a staffing position, is there a union involved at your hospital that can advocate for you? Because sometimes the voice of the singular voice, it just becomes, drowned out in the noise of, oh, well, that's just another person complaining. But a union, together we are strong. You probably heard there's power in numbers. Well, there is power in numbers. And that's why when an entire hospital system strikes and says, no, we're not going to cross the picket line unless you guarantee us safe staffing, better pay, better benefits. No. You know what they do? They come to the table. They bring out the checkbooks. They start making those changes. Do you have someone that can advocate for you? And that's why unions are so important for you to have at the place that you work in. I'm a huge advocate for unions. I was in one for the entirety of my tenure as a bedside nurse. Those questions that I asked earlier, those rhetorical questions, do your workplaces equip you with all of the resources that you need? There may not be all the resources, but are there any resources? Are you given tools to strengthen yourself educationally, academically, socially, emotionally? Are there systems set in place for you? And if not, then perhaps you need to go where you will have those systems. But only you can ask that. But I'm going to leave you with a quote. And I want you to think about this. Complacency is the nest of apathy. When you become complacent, when you've been in a job for years and years and years, and you no longer seek any change, that is when you've become apathetic. You don't care. You're indifferent. Whether you grow or you don't grow, whether things change or don't change, you have comfort. And comfort is lethal. To quote the great David Goggins, right? Comfort will kill you. You got to be a little uncomfortable because discomfort is that spark that creates the fire within. To say, you know what? No, I deserve more. I deserve better. My family deserves better. My mental health deserves better. My physical, my lower back deserves better, right? Because that's the number one complaint nurses have. My lower back or my shoulder from pulling these patients. You deserve better. But the answers aren't in this podcast. The answers are already with you. You have the answers. You actually just need to work backwards and ask the right questions. Are you happy where you are? Will you be happy where you are a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And does it serve your professional and personal needs? I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Nurse Converse. Again, I know that there may be some things said here that you absolutely agree with, and there are some things you absolutely passionately disagree with. And that is the reason why we are having these conversations, because we all experience some, most, or all of it being nurses. I appreciate you joining me, and I'll see you next time on Nurse Converse.
Thanks for joining Nurse Converse, brought to you by Nurse.org. Help us grow by leaving a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Nurse.org supports nurses with career and education tips, life advice, and breaking news. Thank you for all you do and for being you.